Welcome back to Old Charles. Today, we're diving into a fascinating piece of U.S. coin history, the 1965 United States $1 dime. At first glance, it might look like an ordinary Roosevelt dime, the kind you'd still find in your pocket change today. But there's a lot more to this coin than meets the eye. We're going to cover its history, design, condition factors, and of course, its value. So stay tuned until the end, because you might be surprised at what makes this dime special. The dime has a long history in American coinage, but the 1965 Roosevelt dime marked a very important change. Before 1965, dimes were made of 90% silver and 10% copper. However, due to rising silver prices in the early 1960s, the U.S. government faced a serious problem. The silver in coins was becoming worth more than the coins themselves. People began hoarding and melting coins for their silver value, creating a shortage in circulation. To solve this, the U.S. Mint decided to switch from silver to a clad composition in 1965. Starting that year, the dime was minted using an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a pure copper core. This is the same metal composition we still see in dimes today. The change was part of the Coinage Act of 1965, which also affected quarters and half dollars. Interestingly, because of this major transition, the Mint did not strike any dimes with a mint mark in 1965, regardless of whether they were made in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. This was to discourage collectors from hoarding coins based on where they were minted. On the obverse, or front side, you'll find the profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States. The design was introduced in 1946, shortly after his death, in recognition of his leadership and his role in founding the March of Dimes, a campaign to fight polio. On the reverse, you'll see a torch in the center, symbolizing liberty. It is flanked by an olive branch, representing peace, and an oak branch, representing strength and independence. The words E pluribus unum, meaning out of many one, are inscribed as well. When it comes to coin collecting, condition is everything. A 1965 dime in circulated condition, the kind you'd find in pocket change, generally only holds its face value of 10 cents. But as we move up the scale, things change. A coin in fine, F12, condition still shows wear but retains most details. In extremely fine, XF40, condition, light wear is visible only on the highest points of the design. A coin in about uncirculated, 50 Australian dollars, condition shows only slight wear on the hair above Roosevelt's ear. And in mint state, MS60 to MS67, the coin can be nearly flawless, with sharp strikes and brilliant luster. Grading plays a huge role in determining value. Collectors are especially interested in coins with full bands on the reverse torch, which means the horizontal bands are fully separated and sharply struck. So, what's the value of a 1965 dime today in circulated condition? Most 1965 dimes are worth just 10 cents, their face value, since billions were produced. In uncirculated condition, MS60 to MS65, these coins can be worth $1 to $5. High-grade examples, like MS66 or MS67, can range from $20 up to $200 or more, depending on demand and strike quality. But here's where it gets really exciting. There are known rare errors from 1965. Some dimes were accidentally struck on leftover silver planchets from 1964. These silver 1965 dimes are highly valuable and can sell for thousands of dollars at auction. Collectors always keep an eye out for these rare transitional errors. If you think you might have one, the best way to check is by weighing it. Silver dimes weigh 2.5 grams, while clad copper-nickel dimes weigh only 2.27 grams. The 1965 dime marks a major turning point in U.S. coin history, the very first year without silver content. While most examples are common and not particularly valuable, the coin still carries a lot of historical significance. Collectors who build sets of Roosevelt dimes always include this year as a key marker of the transition from silver to clad coinage. And of course, if you're lucky enough to find a 1965 dime struck on a silver planchet, you could be holding a true rarity worth thousands. So there you have it, the story of the 1965 Roosevelt dime. A coin that looks ordinary, but actually represents a huge shift in U.S. coinage history. From its copper-nickel clad composition to its rare silver era versions, this little dime has a lot to tell us. The dime itself has been around since 1796, when the very first draped bust dime was introduced. Over the years, the design changed, from the capped bust dimes of the 1800s to the beautiful seated Liberty dimes in the mid-19th century. Then the famous winged Liberty head dime, better known as the Mercury dime, which circulated from 1916 until 1945 after President Franklin D. Roosevelt passed away in April 1945, the U.S. Mint quickly moved to honor him. He was beloved for his leadership during the Great Depression and World War II, but also remembered for his fight against polio and his role in establishing the March of Dimes charity campaign. By 1946, his portrait appeared on the dime, and it has remained there ever since. Now let's jump forward to the early 1960s. At this time, dimes were made of 90% silver and 10% copper. But silver was no longer cheap, it was becoming more valuable every year. The U.S. Mint faced a crisis. The silver content of the dime was getting close to being worth as much as the coin itself. By 1963 and 1964, the price of silver had risen so much that Americans began hoarding coins, especially dimes, quarters, and half dollars. Think about it. If the silver in a dime was worth 9 or 10 cents, and rising, people could melt them down and profit. This created a serious shortage of coins in circulation. Stores, banks, and everyday Americans were struggling to find enough change to do business. In response, the U.S. government passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which was one of the most significant laws in U.S. numismatic history. The act eliminated silver from the dime and the quarter, and reduced the silver content of the half dollar from 90% down to 40%. Instead, the dime would be struck in a copper-nickel-clad composition, an inner layer of pure copper, sandwiched between outer layers of copper and nickel. The new clad coin weighed 2.27 grams, slightly less than the older silver dime, which weighed 2.5 grams. This change meant that the coins would hold only their face value in metal, making it no longer profitable to melt them down. But there was another interesting twist. In 1965, the Mint was worried that collectors would start hoarding the very first clad dimes, just as they had hoarded silver coins. To prevent this, the Mint decided to remove all mint marks from coins. Whether a dime was made in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, it carried no mint mark at all. This continued until 1968, when mint marks were reintroduced. Because of the sudden switch in composition, 1965 dimes became the first year of the clad era, a turning point in American coinage. Billions were produced, and they circulated widely. But, as with many major transitions, mistakes happened. Some leftover silver planchets from 1964 accidentally made it into production lines. This means a small number of 1965 dimes struck in silver were released into circulation, making them some of the most sought-after transitional era coins today. So, the 1965 dime isn't just another small piece of change. It represents the moment when the U.S. officially left behind silver coinage for everyday use. It's a story of economics, politics, and public trust in the nation's money. Now let's talk about what everyone wants to know, the value of the 1965 Roosevelt dime. At first glance, you might think it's worth only its face value of 10 cents, since billions were minted. And for most coins in circulation, that's true. But when we dig deeper into conditions, grades, and errors, things get a lot more interesting. Most 1965 dimes you'll come across in your pocket change today are considered circulated coins. These have been used in everyday commerce for decades, showing plenty of wear and tear. In this condition, they typically hold only their face value of 10 cents. Some coin shops might buy them in bulk for slightly above face value if they're building rolls or sets, but generally, circulated examples are very common. Where things start to change is in uncirculated condition. These are coins that were never released into circulation and still retain their original mint luster. In Mint State 60 to Mint State 63, a 1965 dime might sell for $1 to $2. In Mint State 64 or 65, values can go up to $5 to $15. In the higher grades, such as MS66, the coin becomes harder to find without scratches, marks, or dullness, and prices can rise to $40 to $100. In extremely high grades like MS67 or MS68, these coins can fetch hundreds of dollars, especially if they've been graded by PCGS or NGC with a full bands designation. Collectors also place a premium on dimes that have what's called full torch bands, or full bands. On the reverse side of the coin, the torch has horizontal bands. When those bands are fully separated and sharply struck, the coin is considered full bands, and its value is much higher. For example, while a regular MS66 dime might be worth $40 to $50, one with full bands could bring $200 to $500, depending on the market. Now, here's where the big money comes in. During the transition from silver to clad coinage in 1965, some silver planchets from 1964 were accidentally fed into the presses. That means a small number of 1,965 dimes were struck in 90% silver instead of copper-nickel clad. How can you tell if you have one? The easiest way is by weight. A silver dime weighs 2.5 grams, while a clad dime weighs only 2.27 grams. Also, the edge of a silver dime will appear solid silver, without the visible copper stripe you see on clad coins. These silver transitional era dimes are extremely rare and highly sought after by collectors. At auctions, they have sold for $3,000, $5,000, even up to $10,000 or more, depending on condition. Finding one of these in your collection or pocket change would be like hitting the jackpot. Other errors from 1965 include off-center strikes, double dies, and wrong planchet errors, which can also add significant value, ranging from $50 to several $100s. Depending on severity and rarity. To give you a perspective, a 1965 Roosevelt dime graded MS68 full bands by PCGS once sold for over $1,500. Meanwhile, a rare 1965 silver planchet dime sold at heritage auctions for more than $8,000. These high-end sales show just how much collectors are willing to pay for coins that seem ordinary at first glance. While the majority of 1965 dimes are only worth 10 cents, there are special cases where the value skyrockets. Collectors always check for condition, strike quality, and weight. If you find a pristine coin or one with a mint error, its value could be hundreds or even thousands of times its face value. So, the next time you see a 1965 dime, don't just toss it aside. Check the condition, look closely at the details, and if you think you've got a rare error, weigh it carefully. Who knows, you could be holding onto a coin that's worth far more than 10 cents.